The real estate agent's card sat on my kitchen counter like an accusation. My son Brandon stood in the doorway of the home I'd lived in for 32 years, his fiancée Tiffany beside him, both waiting for my answer. My name is Thomas Gardner. I'm 61 years old, a retired high school math teacher in Spokane, Washington. This house, a modest 3-bedroom ranch on 2 acres outside the city, represents every sacrifice my late wife, Margaret, and I ever made. We bought it when Brandon was 2, paid it off over 25 years, raised our son here, and buried Margaret from here 4 years ago. Now Brandon wanted me to sell it. "Dad, the wedding venue requires full payment in advance," Brandon said, not for the first time. "Tiffany's parents are contributing $80,000, but we need another $120,000 for the venue, catering, and everything else." "It's just a house," Tiffany added, her voice sweet but with an edge underneath. "You're rattling around in here all alone anyway. Wouldn't you be happier in a nice condo downtown, close to restaurants and activities?" I looked at the woman who would become my daughter-in-law in 6 months. Tiffany was 26, worked in social media marketing, and had expensive tastes. Brandon, my 28-year-old son, who worked as a mid-level accountant, had been different before meeting her. Practical, grounded, more like his mother. "Let me think about it," I said. Brandon's face tightened with frustration. "Dad, we don't have time for you to think about it. The venue needs an answer by Friday. That's 3 days." "Then I guess my answer is no." Tiffany's sweetness evaporated. "Mr. Gardner, Brandon is your only son. This is the most important day of our lives. Any father who truly loved his son would want to give him the wedding of his dreams." I set down my coffee cup carefully. Any son who truly loved his father wouldn't ask him to sell his home for a party. "It's not a party, it's a wedding." Tiffany's voice rose. "My sister had 400 guests and a live orchestra. My parents' friends are expecting something sophisticated. We can't get married in some backyard with paper plates." "Your sister's husband is a hedge fund manager," I said quietly. "Brandon is an accountant making $72,000 a year. Different circumstances call for different celebrations." Brandon stepped forward. "Dad, I make good money. We both do. We can afford a nice wedding." "Then afford it with your own money. The house is worth at least $380,000, Brandon said. "Even after selling costs, you'd walk away with $360,000. You could buy a condo for $150,000 and still have $210,000 left over. You'd be set for life." I'd heard this pitch before. They'd clearly researched local real estate values, calculated my potential profit, and planned my entire future. "This house is set for life," I said. "It's paid off. My property taxes are $3,200 a year. My utilities run maybe $2,000. I can live here on my teacher's pension indefinitely." "Living here alone, surrounded by memories of Mom," Brandon said, and I heard Margaret's name used as a weapon. "Don't you think she'd want you to be happy? To help your son start his marriage right?" I stood up. "Your mother would want me to teach you the same lesson we taught you growing up. You live within your means. You don't start a marriage by bankrupting your parents." Tiffany grabbed her purse. "Let's go, Brandon. Your father clearly doesn't care about your happiness." They left, Tiffany's sports car kicking up gravel in my driveway. I sat back down at the kitchen table, in the chair where Margaret and I had eaten thousands of meals, paid bills, helped Brandon with homework, and planned our modest retirement. The house was quiet around me, full of ghosts and memories, but it was mine. My phone rang that evening. Brandon's voice was softer, closer to the boy he'd been before Tiffany. "Dad, I'm sorry about today. Tiffany's just stressed about the wedding." "Brandon, do you want this wedding? This expensive, elaborate production?" "Silence, then. I want to marry Tiffany. The wedding is what she wants. Those are different things." "I know, but her family, her friends, they're all wealthy. I don't want to embarrass her. Son, if she's embarrassed by who you are and what you can afford, that's a problem bigger than any wedding. You don't understand. Her parents already think I'm not good enough for her. This wedding is my chance to prove I can provide. By using my money? Another silence. When you put it that way, it sounds bad. It is bad, Brandon. You're asking me to sell my home so you can impress people who've already decided you're inadequate. How does that math work out? I have to go. Tiffany's calling. He hung up. Over the next week, the pressure campaign intensified. Brandon called daily. Tiffany sent text messages with links to articles about toxic parents who sabotage their children's happiness. Brandon's future mother-in-law, Patricia, even called to explain that in their circle, weddings at this budget level were expected. Thomas, I'm sure Brandon has explained our family's position in the community, Patricia said, her voice dripping with condescension. We have standards to maintain. Surely you want your son to fit into that world. I want my son to build his own world, not pretend to live in yours. How terribly sad for him. She hung up. I called my brother Jim in Seattle. He'd been watching this unfold from a distance. They're insane, Jim said flatly. You worked 35 years as a teacher. Margaret worked as a nurse. You saved every penny to pay off that house. Nobody has the right to ask you to sell it for a party. Brandon says Margaret would want me to help him. Margaret would have shut this down in 5 seconds. Remember when Brandon wanted that expensive car in college? What did she tell him? I smiled despite myself. That transportation gets you places. Status just gets you debt. Exactly. Stand your ground, Tom. This is a test, and if you fail it, you'll be funding their entire lives. Jim was right. I knew he was right. But Brandon was my only child, and the thought of him getting married without me there hurt more than I wanted to admit. 2 weeks before the supposed Friday deadline, I received a registered letter from an attorney, Tiffany's father's attorney, apparently. The letter threatened legal action if I didn't honor my verbal commitment to help fund the wedding. I called my own attorney, Bob Harrison, who had handled Margaret's estate. This is garbage, Bob said after reading it. You made no verbal commitment, and even if you had, it wouldn't be legally enforceable. They're trying to intimidate you. Should I respond? I'll send a letter telling them to pound sand, in legal language. Tom, how far are you willing to let this go? As far as it needs to go. Bob's letter was delivered the next day. That evening, Brandon showed up at my door, furious. Dad, Tiffany's father hired an attorney. You made this a legal issue. I received a legal threat. Bob responded to it. That's how this works. This is my wedding, my one chance to start my marriage right, and you're turning it into a war. Brandon, sit down. I don't want to sit down. Sit down. Something in my voice, the teacher voice I'd used for 35 years, made him stop. He sat on the couch where he'd grown up, where Margaret had read him stories, where we'd talked through every problem from failed tests to college decisions. Son, I'm going to tell you something important. Are you listening? He nodded, sullen. Your mother and I bought this house for $68,000 in 1993. We put every spare dollar into the mortgage. We drove old cars. We took one vacation every 5 years. We wore clothes until they fell apart. We did this because we wanted you to have stability, to grow up in a real home, to never worry about where you'd live. I know the story, Dad. You know the words. You don't know the meaning. When your mother got cancer, we'd already paid off the house. That meant we could use my insurance and savings for her treatment instead of worrying about the mortgage. When she died, this house was the only thing that kept me standing. Every room has her in it. Every corner holds a memory of our family. Brandon's eyes were wet. I know you miss Mom. This isn't about missing her. It's about understanding that homes aren't just assets. They're foundations. and you don't destroy your foundation to build someone else's castle. Tiffany's not building a castle. She just wants a nice wedding. Tiffany wants a $200,000 wedding that neither of you can afford. There's a difference between nice and extravagant. Brandon stood up. I thought you'd understand. I thought family meant something to you. Family means everything to me. That's why I'm saying no. He left without another word. Friday came, the supposed deadline for the venue deposit. Brandon called at 10 a.m. We can't secure the venue without your help. The wedding is off. Brandon. Don't. Just don't. You've made your choice. Live with it. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen, in Margaret's chair this time, looking at her empty seat across from me. Did I do the right thing? I asked the silence. The silence, as always, had no answer. 3 days later, Brandon called again. We found a different venue. The Grand Sterling Hotel. It's $175,000 for everything. Tiffany's parents can do $90,000. We need you to cover $85,000. No. Dad, please. We've already sent save the dates. People are expecting this wedding. Then have a wedding you can afford. We're going to lose deposits. How much in deposits? About $8,000 so far. I'll give you $10,000 for a reasonable wedding, local venue, 100 guests, something you can build on, not dig yourself into debt over. That's insulting. It's generous. It's also non-negotiable. He hung up again. The calls stopped after that. So did all communication. I texted Brandon weekly, asking how he was, trying to maintain a connection. He responded with one-word answers, or not at all. I told myself I was doing the right thing. That teaching him financial responsibility now would save him decades of problems later. That Margaret would have agreed with me. But I was lonely. The house felt bigger than ever, emptier than it had even right after Margaret died. Jim visited in June. We sat on the back porch, drinking beer and watching the sun set over my 2 acres. Heard from Brandon? Jim asked. Not really. You? Nope. Kid's being stubborn. He gets that from me. He gets the stubbornness from you. He gets the poor judgment from Tiffany. Jim took a long drink. You know what's going to happen, right? Tell me. One of 2 things. Either he marries her, they go into massive debt for this wedding, and they resent you forever. Or he doesn't marry her, realizes what she is, and comes back apologizing. What if there's a third option? He marries her, they have a reasonable wedding, and everyone moves forward. Jim snorted. You met Tiffany. That woman doesn't do reasonable. In July, I received a wedding invitation. The Grand Sterling Hotel. September 15th. Black tie required. No mention of my contribution, or lack thereof. Just a formal invitation, like I was any other guest. I RSVP'd that I would attend. August brought a phone call from Patricia, Tiffany's mother. Thomas, we need to discuss your gift to the couple. I offered $10,000 for a reasonable wedding. The offer stands. That's hardly appropriate given the circumstances. What circumstances? You're Brandon's only parent. Traditionally, the groom's family covers at least 30% of the wedding costs. That would be $60,000. Where I come from, traditionally, people don't bankrupt themselves for parties. How very lower middle class of you. I hung up. 2 weeks before the wedding, Brandon called. Dad, I need to tell you something. My heart jumped. Was he calling it off? Had he finally seen sense? We had to downsize the wedding. Not cancel it. Just make it smaller. 200 guests instead of 350. The Grand Sterling Ballroom instead of the estate room. That sounds more reasonable. It's not what Tiffany wanted. She's devastated. Her parents had to cover more because we couldn't. Because you wouldn't. I offered $10,000. For what? A backyard barbecue. This wedding is still costing $140,000. Tiffany's parents are paying $100,000. We're covering $40,000 by taking out a loan. My stomach dropped. A loan? Brandon, you're starting your marriage with $40,000 in debt. We didn't have a choice. You had a choice. You chose to go into debt rather than have a modest wedding you could afford. I'm calling to tell you that if you come to the wedding, you need to bring a check for at least $25,000. Otherwise, don't bother showing up. Son. I mean it, Dad. You've already humiliated me in front of Tiffany's family. The least you can do is help fix what you broke. I didn't break anything. You broke us. You and your stubborn pride. You could have helped. You chose not to. So bring a check or don't come. He hung up before I could respond. I sat at my kitchen table for hours, thinking about choices. Brandon had chosen Tiffany over common sense. Chosen debt over prudence. Chosen impression over reality. And I had to choose too. I called Bob Harrison the next morning. I need to update my will. What changes? Everything goes to charity. Not Brandon. I want to leave him something, but not money. What did you have in mind? I'll tell you when I see you. Bob drafted the new will that week. I signed it on a Wednesday, alone in his office, thinking about legacies and lessons. September 15th arrived, the day of the wedding. I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral, and drove to the Grand Sterling Hotel. The parking lot was full of expensive cars. I parked my 12-year-old Subaru between a Mercedes and a BMW, feeling exactly like what Tiffany's family thought I was. Lower middle class, inadequate, embarrassing. Inside, the hotel was decorated like a palace, ice sculptures, elaborate floral arrangements, a champagne fountain. I saw the venue coordinator directing staff and asked her a question. How much does this cost per hour? She looked uncomfortable. I'm not supposed to discuss that with guests. Rough estimate? For this package, about $20,000. I did the math. 5-hour reception, $100,000 minimum, not counting the ceremony space, flowers, food, band, and photographer. I found a seat in the back of the ceremony room. Other guests filed in, women in designer dresses, men in custom suits. I recognized some of Tiffany's family members from photos. They didn't acknowledge me. Brandon stood at the altar, looking nervous in his tuxedo. He scanned the crowd, found me, and his expression hardened. The ceremony was elaborate. Tiffany looked beautiful in a dress that probably cost more than my first car. Brandon's vows mentioned building a life of adventure, luxury, and love. Nothing about partnership, struggle, or reality. At the reception, I sat at a table in the back with people I didn't know. Brandon and Tiffany did their first dance to a song performed by a live band. The dinner was a 5-course meal that would have fed my family for a month when Brandon was growing up. During the toasts, Tiffany's father talked about his daughter's sophistication, her standards, her right to the best life could offer. He mentioned Brandon's limitations and how the family was helping them rise above his circumstances. Brandon smiled through it, but I saw him wince. I didn't stay for the cake cutting. I left before the champagne toast, put an envelope on the gift table, and walked out to my Subaru. The envelope contained a check for $10,000 and a note, for when you're ready to build a real life. Love, Dad. I drove home, changed into jeans and a flannel shirt, and sat on my back porch watching the stars come out over the property Margaret and I had built together. My phone buzzed around midnight. Brandon, did you leave money? I did. How much? $10,000. That's it. That's your wedding gift after I told you not to come unless you brought $25,000? It's what I could give without compromising my principles. Your principles are more important than your son's happiness. My son's happiness isn't measured by the price tag on his wedding. He hung up. I didn't hear from Brandon for 3 months. In December, Jim called. Heard from your son? No. You? Yeah. He called yesterday. Wanted to know if I could lend him money. My heart sank. For what? Wouldn't say. But I did some digging. Tom, they're in trouble. The wedding loan was $40,000 at 18% interest. They're barely making minimum payments. Tiffany's been fired from her job for attitude issues. Brandon's picked up freelance accounting work at night to make ends meet. Did you lend him money? Hell no. I told him to call his father and apologize. He's too proud for that. Then he's too proud for his own good. January brought a letter, not from Brandon, but from a credit counseling service. Brandon had listed me as a reference for debt consolidation. I called the number on the letter. Mr. Gardner, we're working with your son to restructure $73,000 in debt. Can you verify his employment and family support situation? What kind of debt? Wedding expenses, credit cards, personal loans. $73,000. In 4 months. I cannot verify family support, I said. He's on his own. The counselor sighed. Sir, your son is in serious financial trouble. He's facing potential bankruptcy. If family could help. Family offered help. He refused it because it wasn't enough. I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, room by room, remembering Brandon's bedroom, still decorated with his high school baseball trophies. The living room where we'd watched movies every Friday night. The kitchen where Margaret had taught him to cook. Had I been too stubborn? Too rigid? Should I have just given him the money, saved him from himself? I called Bob Harrison the next morning. Bob, if I gave Brandon money now, would it help or hurt him? Bob was quiet for a moment. Tom, what do you think your wife would say? She'd say I teach through consequences, not rescue. There's your answer. February brought Valentine's Day. I sent Brandon a card. No check, no lecture, just a card that said, thinking of you. Love, Dad. He didn't respond. In March, I received a notice. Brandon and Tiffany had filed for bankruptcy. Chapter 7, Complete Liquidation. The wedding loan, the credit cards, everything. I called Brandon. He answered on the 5th ring. Dad. I heard about the bankruptcy. Come to gloat. No, I came to listen. Silence then. We lost everything. The apartment, the furniture, even the wedding gifts we hadn't returned. Tiffany's parents aren't speaking to us. Her friends disappeared when the money dried up. And I don't know who I am anymore. Come home, I said. What? Come home. Both of you. Stay here until you get back on your feet. After everything? After I said those things to you? You're my son. The door's always open. More silence, then crying. Dad, I'm so sorry. I was an idiot. I let Tiffany and her family convince me that the wedding mattered more than everything else, that impressing people was more important than reality. We'll talk when you get here. When can you come? Is tomorrow too soon? Tomorrow's perfect. Brandon and Tiffany arrived the next afternoon in a moving truck containing what little they'd salvaged from the bankruptcy. Tiffany looked different. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just a tired woman who'd learned expensive lessons. Mr. Gardner, she said at the door, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about everything. About you, about the house, about what matters. Come inside. Let's get you settled. They moved into Brandon's old room. Over the next weeks, we established new patterns. Brandon got a job with a local accounting firm. Tiffany found work as a receptionist. They paid me $400 a month rent and insisted on helping with groceries and utilities. We ate dinner together every night at the kitchen table where I'd raised Brandon, where Margaret had taught him the values he'd forgotten and was now relearning. One evening, About 2 months after they'd moved in, Tiffany asked me a question. "Mr. Gardner, why did you say no?" "Really?" "Because saying yes would have taught you both the wrong lesson." "What lesson?" "That money solves problems. That appearances matter more than reality. That you can spend your way to happiness." Brandon set down his fork. "Dad, I need to know something. Did you ever doubt yourself? Ever think maybe you should have just helped us?" "Every day. Especially when you stopped calling. But doubt doesn't mean I was wrong." "You weren't wrong," Brandon said. "The wedding lasted 5 hours. We'll be paying for it emotionally for years. But if we'd also been paying for it financially, it would have destroyed us completely." Tiffany nodded. "My parents spent $100,000 to impress people who forgot about the wedding a week later. We spent $40,000 we didn't have for the same result. Your $10,000 gift is the only money that actually means something." "Why?" "Because it came with no strings," she said. "You gave it even after we treated you terribly. That's real generosity." In June, Brandon and Tiffany moved into a small apartment across town. Modest, affordable, theirs. Before they left, Brandon found me in the garage. "Dad, I want to understand something. The house, the values, the stubbornness. All of it comes from Mom, doesn't it? Your mother taught me that real wealth isn't money. It's integrity, stability, and knowing who you are." I forgot that for a while. You remembered when it mattered. He hugged me, something he hadn't done since before the wedding planning started. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Never crossed my mind. 2 years after the wedding, Brandon and Tiffany had rebuilt their lives. They'd paid off the bankruptcy, established good credit, and saved $15,000 for emergencies. They took a delayed honeymoon, a weekend camping trip that cost $200 and meant everything. Tiffany's relationship with her parents remained strained. They'd cut her off financially after the bankruptcy, unable to accept that their daughter had failed. "Sometimes I'm angry at them," Tiffany told me during one of our weekly dinners. "But mostly I'm grateful. Their rejection forced me to figure out who I am without their money." "And who is that?" "Someone stronger than I thought. Someone who values different things now." On the 3rd anniversary of the wedding, Brandon called me. "Dad, can we come over? There's something we want to talk about." They arrived that evening with a folder of documents. "We've been saving," Brandon said. "Working extra hours, cutting expenses, being really careful. And we've managed to save $25,000. That's impressive. We want to give you $10,000. Payment for what you gave us as a wedding gift." "Brandon, that was a gift. No strings." "We know. But we want to pay it back anyway. Not as a debt, but as a thank you. You gave us money when we didn't deserve it. We want to give it back now that we do." I looked at the check, $10,000. The exact amount I'd given them 3 years ago. "What will you do with the other $15,000? I asked. Tiffany smiled. "We're buying a house. Well, a small house. A fixer-upper that needs work. But it's ours, and we can actually afford it. Your mother would be proud." "We're doing it because of her," Brandon said. "You told me once that this house was your foundation. We want to build our own foundation now, not with borrowed money or family pressure, but with what we've earned." I took the check, then tore it in half. "Dad, consider it a down payment on your house. From Margaret and me. The wedding gift you should have accepted 3 years ago." Brandon's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do. Now you understand what it means." They bought the house a month later, a small 2-bedroom in an older neighborhood. It needed paint, new floors, and updated plumbing. Brandon and I spent weekends working on it together, teaching him the skills Margaret and I had used to maintain our own home. Tiffany learned too. She and Brandon painted every room, refinished the hardwood floors, and planted a garden in the backyard. "This is better than the Grand Sterling Hotel," Tiffany said one afternoon, covered in paint. How so? Because we built it. Nobody can take that away. 5 years after the wedding, I was diagnosed with early-stage lung cancer. Caught early, treatable, but serious. Brandon moved back home immediately to help with treatments. He drove me to appointments, managed medications, and kept the house running. You don't have to do this, I told him. Yes, I do. You took care of me when I was at my worst. I'm taking care of you now. During one chemo session, sitting in the treatment room, Brandon said something that surprised me. Dad, remember when you said the house was full of Mom? That every corner had memories? I remember. I understand now. The house isn't just walls and a roof. It's everything you and Mom built together, your marriage, your values, your life. Selling it would have been like selling all of that. I'm glad you see it. I see a lot of things now. How you and Mom lived below your means so I could have opportunities. How you worked extra jobs to pay off the mortgage early. How every choice you made was building towards something lasting. That's what parents do. Not all parents. Tiffany's parents spent lavishly and saved nothing. Now they're in their 60s, still working, still worried about appearances. You're secure because you built something real. The cancer responded well to treatment. By that fall, I was in remission, weaker but alive. Brandon and Tiffany hosted Thanksgiving at their house that year. It was small, crowded with borrowed furniture and mismatched plates. Derek and Amy came, Jim drove over from Seattle, and Tiffany's younger sister attended, estranged from her own parents over similar issues. Before dinner, Brandon stood up to make a toast. 5 years ago, I wanted a wedding that would impress people. My dad offered me something better, a lesson in what actually matters. I was too stupid to take it. He looked at me. Dad, thank you for loving me enough to say no. Thank you for teaching me that real wealth isn't money. Thank you for showing me what it means to build a life that lasts. He raised his glass. To foundations, to family, to knowing the difference between what we want and what we need. We drank to that. After dinner, Brandon pulled me aside. Dad, I want to show you something. He led me to his small office and pulled out a folder. Inside were financial statements showing $47,000 in savings, retirement accounts, and a mortgage they were ahead on. This is what you gave me, he said. Not the $10,000 check. This, the understanding that security comes from living below your means, saving consistently, and building something real. Your mother would be proud. I'm trying to make both of you proud. You already have. 10 years after the wedding, I was 71, retired, healthy, still living in the house Margaret and I bought 32 years earlier. The house was worth $520,000 now, but I had no plans to sell. Brandon and Tiffany had 2 children, Emma and Lucas. They brought them to the house every Sunday for dinner. The kids played in the same backyard where Brandon had played, climbed the same trees, explored the same woods. Emma asked me one Sunday, "Grandpa, why don't you live in a big house like Grammy Patricia?" Because this house is exactly the size I need. Any bigger would just be wasting space. But Grammy says big houses mean you're successful. What do you think success means? She thought about it. Being happy. That's exactly right. And this house makes me happy. Lucas, younger and more direct, asked, "Grandpa, is our house too small? Do you have a place to sleep?" Yes. Do you have food to eat? Yes. Do your parents love you? Yes. Then your house is exactly the right size. Brandon overheard this conversation. Later, in the kitchen, he said, "You're teaching them the same lessons you taught me, the ones I ignored for too long. Better they learn them young. I want them to know about the wedding when they're old enough. I want them to know how stupid their father was and how wise their grandfather was. I was just a man who loved his son enough to risk losing him. You didn't lose me. You saved me. On the 20th anniversary of Margaret's death, I gathered the family at the house, Brandon and Tiffany, their kids, Jim, Derek, and Amy. We planted a tree in Margaret's memory, a maple that would grow for generations. Standing in the backyard, watching the kids help plant the tree, I thought about foundations, about the house Margaret and I built together, about the values we tried to instill, about the mistakes our son made and the wisdom he eventually found. Brandon had once wanted to sacrifice this foundation for a single day of appearances. Now he understood that the house, the land, the memories, they were worth more than any wedding could ever be. The tree would grow here, in the yard of the house I'd refused to sell. Enla and Lucas would climb it someday. Their children might climb it too. That was a legacy. Not money spent on ice sculptures and champagne fountains, but roots that went deep and branches that reached high. Brandon found me watching the kids dig in the dirt. "Dad, I need to tell you something. We paid off our mortgage last month. The house is ours, free and clear." At 38, that's remarkable. We doubled up on payments, cut expenses, stayed focused. 15-year mortgage paid in 8. Your mother would be proud. We're doing it because of her. Because of you. Because you taught me that security comes from owning, not owing. He paused. When you're gone and I inherit this place, I'm not selling it. I'm keeping it for Emma and Lucas, so they can have what you gave me, a foundation that lasts. Even knowing what it cost you to learn that lesson. Especially knowing that the best lessons are the hard ones. We stood together, watching the sun set over the property, the house behind us, solid and paid for, the tree before us, small but growing, the family around us, together despite everything. I'd refused to sell my house for Brandon's wedding. It had cost me 2 years of estrangement, countless hours of worry, and the risk of losing my son forever. But standing there, watching Brandon teach his children the same values Margaret and I had taught him, I knew I'd made the right choice. Some foundations are worth defending. Some lessons are worth the cost. Some risks are worth taking. And some loves are strong enough to say no when yes would be easier. That's what parents do. That's what Margaret would have done. That's what I had done. The house stood behind us, 35 years old now, still solid, still home. And that was worth everything.